really all in the resolution we can get from this thing?
Which have been slides?
I have a few calling question slides in there now. Have a look. Okay, so it seems people have stopped trickling in. So this is the second meeting of the core working group. And it's only Tuesday, so I'm still reminding people that I'm still reminding people that this is an IETF meeting. We are using the IPR principles. If you know about a patent claim about technology that you are talking about, you have to tell us, or you can decide not to talk about that. And yeah, you will be on video and recorded and everything. So there is a note well for that. We have a slightly compressed agenda today because we pushed over PubSub from yesterday. Now Michael is not on Meet at home, so maybe we can start with Senemel, Ari. Oh, great.
Perfect. And
It was working 5 minutes ago.
okay. So it has to be very near.
Okay, then I'm doing
Okay.
mine again.
So this, if this slide change starts to work. So okay, so I'm gonna give a quick update on Senemels. We had a working group last call already on that. A lot of good comments, and we made a bunch of changes since the last IETF. Lots of editorial changes, mostly thanks to all the good reviews we got. A few clarifications that are worth mentioning. One was that what happens when you do the result records, what happens with the base version field. So the result records are where you have all the values in all the records. Current values are added to the base values, and all the records become self-contained. So it was a bit of confusion what happens with the version, and we now clarified that yes, the version, if it's something else than a default, needs to be in all the records. But if it's a default, you should not put it there. Also, as decided in the last meeting, we removed the link extension. It's going to be done as an extension document. There was a few remnants on the CDDL that we still need to clean up, but other link functionality was removed already. Also, we changed the registry policy to expert review only. There's one place where it still has also the IESG approval, but that's going to be all expert review as decided in the last meeting. And then it was what Dave raised in the previous meeting was the point that there was Celsius and Kelvin both in the units, and it would be good to clarify why is that. And now there's a paragraph explaining why is this the case, because even the original ISO spec has it both of them at the same level, so it's reasonable to have also Senemel have support both Celsius and Kelvin as a unit. Few more things we will do now soon after this meeting is One, there was a comment from Hannes that the current security consideration section was quite thin. It just referred to the privacy section and the media type registrations. And the reason was that the media type registrations need to have their own security considerations. But now, just had a chat with Alex, say that it would be okay to have it only once in the security considerations and then refer to that security considerations section in the media type registration. So we don't have to have it 8 times because we actually register 8 different media types. Then there was comment from Jim Shard to have a bit more details on the INR register table to have make sure we have all the different data types and labels in the table. We did take a stab at that. It ends up being quite ugly table, but maybe we need to have one for IANA and another one for those who actually read the specification and use it. So we'll do some editorial tweaks there, and we should be able to propose something very soon. And then there's a few small cleanup things, but the key thing is, yeah, let's publish this. Any questions or comments? I see fingers up from our 80. I think we're good to go. Thanks.
and say you can have a 202 with retry after, which says there is a location and that will be available, but not right now. So I'm wondering whether that would solve the problem without getting this new response code. Which,
I would be very happy to follow that line.
Little special purpose.
Robert, will be fine for me.
This is Dave Robin. I'm curious, normally the created is as a result of a post. Isn't this a get? Aren't you wanting to get a response code to a get?
Yes, a get.
So this is kind of a really messed up thing. You've got a get that's returning a location, and I agree that would be normally what you do with a created, and here's the location header. So I'm wondering whether the semantic is just wrong. Should you be doing a post and getting, saying post basically an empty body that says create me my response?
I see what you mean.
And then I'm telling you, oh, hey, I created it and here's where it is.
Oh no.
As opposed to returning a location header with as a response to a get.
Okay. We are a bit more optimistic than that. So the client usually expects a voucher request back.
Right.
So it's only in exceptional cases that the voucher is not available. And then instead of getting back the response you're requesting, you're getting back a location where you can ask again for the same voucher.
So
it seems to me that you should get back an answer, but the answer in the data is a choice of a voucher or a location to go get it and a delay and all that. And you don't introduce any. It's a success code. You don't introduce any new codes. You have a header. You just say, here's my answer. And my answer is either a voucher or instructions as to where to get the voucher.
If I understand you correctly, you say solve this at the application level.
Solve this in the body of the response.
Do I understand correctly? You say solve this at the application level?
Yes.
Okay. Well, that's another suggestion. Yeah. It's also
unless there's other use cases.
I thought this was more neat. Okay.
I'm just, it confuses me to return a created or a location header or whatever in response to a get. That just doesn't fit with my.
This follows the
Restful
HTTP rules, actually.
Yeah. But either one will work.
So what I didn't know is this is about a get, really.
Yeah.
This is not about a post where you get a voucher, but
Oh, sorry. I'm not too sure. I thought it was in get.
okay, we can take this to the list, but I
Okay.
think we have a few ideas
Yeah. Okay.
how to do this, and let's finish the discussion soon on the list because we want this.
Very good. I thought Michael already started it a bit. Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, so we can. Michael, are you there? Michael Costa? I think we're doing Oscar now.
Hello, can you hear me? Yes. Hi, I'm Francesca. I'm presenting the OSCORE update. So first of all, the change of name. Until now, you know this as OSCORE, but now it's called OSCORE. So Object Security for Constraint Restful Environments. Name change proposed by Dave. Thank you. And it's version 06. So what's the status of the draft? This is a quick high-level update. First of all, now, yes, Hannes?
Since you talked about the title, OSCORE, actually, if you want to be totally correct, it's actually not object security, because it's actually co-op message signing and potentially encryption.
Yeah.
No, but the focus is well, false advertising. No, it's not.
So, Hannes is our favorite commenter on this topic. Göran Selander. I just want to comment on Hannes' use of the word signature is not correct, because this is not at all about signatures.
There is no signature.
There is no signatures, so that's wrong. I think we shouldn't proceed that discussion.
Okay.
I think the important thing is that this is based on an object secure standard. It's based on COSI. And that's why it's called object secure core.
Okay. I'm gonna move forward with the updates. Yeah, if you have comments, please post it. Okay, so one first update. Now we protect the co-op code, which is encrypted, and this is so it wasn't encrypted before. And we add the dummy code that is outside for the proxy to read, and we always use post or fetch for requests based on if there is observe or not, because observe does not support post. And we always use 204 for responses. Second update, OSCORE now has a full section of describing how cross-protocol translators work. Also, thank you, Dave. And this was based on an OCF request, and this is the reason for the name change. And this defines a new HTTP header called object security. Then we changed how the COSI compressed object is transported. So now in the co-op payload, we have the ciphertext, and in the object security option value, we have everything else. So all the header fields and everything that is needed. Then we did change that we announced last time, which was we removed the OSCON, which was object security of content, from the appendix. We simplified the observe processing based on Christian feedback and suggestions. Thank you, Christian. And we update the nonce construction. Now the sender ID is part of the nonce, and the partial IV does not need to be sent in non-observed responses, which allows for memory save. So in general, we did some updates, but nothing major. Then I wanted to report on the interop. This was during the IETF hackathon here in Singapore. We had 2 participants, thanks Christian and Jim. And in total, we've done 5 interop. The last interop includes the latest changes and created a couple of issues that we are solving now. We have solved some already, and we plan to solve them all by the end of this week. We also have updated the test specification. You can find them in the link that is up there. And yeah, we have 15 tests on succeeding and failing OSCORE processing, and we can say that this was successful as the 2 implementations interop. So for what issues we have left, you can always see the issue tracker, which is updated, and even the discussion that goes on in the mailing list gets reported in the issue tracker. So we have 1 issue that was about observation renewal, and I think Christian already reported that in the mailing list. And then, as I said, minor issues as a result of the interop, and then some more general issues that have been parked until now are privacy and traffic analysis considerations and review. Then RFC 2119 compliance as per Jim's request, and we still need to put in the test vectors. But apart from that, we think we're ready for a working group last call. So we plan on fixing all these minor issues that we talked about by the end of this week and submit the new version. And then for us, we can go for working group last call.
Since you didn't have a slide about the OCF one, I was going to, unless you want to, I can give the summary from the report out with the discussion from OCF. So we had a joint meeting between Thing-to-Thing Research Group and OCF on Friday of last week. And this was after the OCF had some discussion that I led in OCF about would the new version of OS Core actually suffice for all OCF needs? Do they have any other things that they would want? And the outcome of that is far as anybody in OCF knows right now, the current draft meets all the OCF needs. Yay! There was a editorial suggestion which the author has accepted,
Yeah, and we have included
which was
that.
to add a table about which header fields are encrypted versus not, just for readability. But as far as the normative parts, OCF said, well, we can't think of anything that would prevent OCF from using it as is. There were things that OCF might want IETF to do in the future, in addition, that might use OS core. But as far as this, I think the message from OCF was, yeah, draft looks good, please publish, type of thing, or please complete the work and publish according to your normal mechanism. There's no asks. An example of something that they said that IETF might want to consider in future work that is not part of OS core but might use OS core is something that would say how you might protect, confidentiality-wise, might protect some of the headers that OS core does not cover today. So, like the identity of the final destination, the URI host, for example. How you might sort of hide that from a set of intermediaries in the middle of a path that you want to protect from, with some notion of, they call it tunneling, but whatever the mechanism is, what's the IETF recommended way to say tunnel OS core inside something, whether it's IP tunneling or OS core inside OS core, whatever else it is, right? So they said it would be great if IETF in the future could write some informational document that said, or whether it's informational or proposed standard, I don't think they care, some document that said how you might think about protecting that, and they might be interested in that too. But the bottom line was, I think they said, yep, looks good.
Thank you, Dave.
So where are we with respect to security reviews of this?
We've had many security people review. One of them is Jim. It was more for last couple of meetings, we've asked for more co-op expert review. So that's what we felt was maybe missing. But I mean, that can happen, I guess, in working group last call.
Okay. So who has actually reviewed this document, say, in a state from July or later? Okay, we have 3 hands. So
I know that
there
Christian
is
too, even if
some
he...
work to be done. Alexei?
Yeah, a quick question. Do you need any crypto review, or do you need any crypto review, or you're happy with the way it is?
Crypto.
Okay.
COSI.
No, that's fine.
Yeah.
I mean, OSCORE uses COSI for what algorithms to use, and so I think that's covered. But Jim, yeah.
Jim is saying don't bother. That's fine.
I mean, it will get sector review eventually, but I mean, basically everything's built on COSI, so there's nothing really interesting.
So the only thing that worried me on the slide set was that you fiddled with the nonce a little bit.
We got comments, like we asked people who were most active too, and they didn't have any problem with that. So
we are going to search out for people during working last call, and then of course during IETF last call.
Yeah, that's good.
But of course, having a couple of people look at it beforehand might be a good thing.
Jim Schott, the fiddling with the nonce was basically a setup for future work, but it essentially, since for this document, since the keys are separate, how we fiddled with the nonce is not a security problem. It's just maybe a little bit of a pain for certain situations. But it guarantees when we go into the group document that we have complete separation of the nonce space based on the number of people in the system.
Göran Senander. I'd just like to add to what Jim stated here, that the change in the nonce construction actually simplifies to review to make sure that the nonces are distinct for the different cases. So that's actually an improvement into it was previously version, it was harder to sort of understand, are the nonces really unique? Now it's very clear because the nonce is constructed by the entity sending. So it's always one entity which is clearly pointed out. So I think that comment would apply better to the previous version.
So how do you ensure uniqueness of the sender identity?
That is an assumption.
Okay.
So that's a working assumption here, that the sender identity. And that's, yeah, so that you have to sort out either through the key exchange protocol or through a trusted third party.
So yeah, we will submit the new version, and then we think we're ready for working group last call.
Okay. So do you have a timeline for that?
By the end of this week, hopefully we'll have it.
Wow.
It will not solve like the list of issues, but we think that like test vectors and such can be added
sure.
easily. So.
Okay.
Marco.
So maybe as an introduction to the next item, in Prague we had an in-room consensus for adopting the document, but given to some discussions in the security area, we didn't act on this consensus. And since we meet today, we can check, do we have new information that would maybe speak against the consensus we have in Prague. So go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Carsten. Marco, Tilokanai 6. Few updates on this. We have submitted just before the cutoff a new version, now version 4. A lot of editorial editings, mostly to improve readability of this document. Like a lot of details were moved as appendices section, especially as the initialization of new endpoints, handling and provisioning of public keys, and approaches for handling with synchronization of sequence numbers. And synchronization is thought to be lost. Plus is, of course, this version already aligned with the latest OSCORE that Francesca just presented. Finally, we also addressed all comments we got in Prague, especially from Jim. Thanks again for that. This is it. That's version 4 online.
So while Hannes runs to the microphone, maybe we can get a quick question. Who would be willing to provide reviews of this document if we adopt it? Okay, that looks pretty good. 5 people. Thank you. Hannes?
Hi. Given that we got the IPR notice on one of the ACE documents that essentially provided very similar functionality, there was this IPR disclaimer that I forwarded, and I was wondering what the IPR status on this one is. Whether you received
I'm personally not aware of any.
I'm not aware of any IPR either. Jonas Elander.
Yeah, it might be useful to check because obviously there's a remarkable similarity in these multicast co-op security mechanisms, and
so I like to explain this. This is not easy to understand always. So basically, the setting is in this group we're working on a communication security protocol, which applies to unicast as well as multicast. In ACE, we're working on a key distribution mechanism. So that's providing the keys for the different devices in the multicast group. So that's the difference. So Hannes is referring to a document he has written for ACE, which did both.
Okay, so does the working group have sufficient clarity about the patent claim situation on this document.
Alexei Malenkov again. Hannes, I'm sorry I missed most of ACE. So can you tell a bit more about IPR? Is it third-party declaration? Is it who is the patent holder or whatever?
Yeah.
So Ericsson has declared IPR on a draft which is doing key distribution for multicast in ACE.
In this document, also referring back, different question, referring back to discussion in ACE, is this document providing a solution for symmetric keys or only asymmetric? Or does it not do any of those?
So this draft provides this. Maybe the author wants to answer?
Yes.
Marco, go ahead.
You are also awesome.
Yeah, okay, I can take the answer. So maybe the presenter wanted to. So this draft provides a solution for multicast security, which is based on adding a signature to a COSI object. So it's the counter signature field, which you add. So if you have the counter signature field, then you can verify, so you have source origin, so you can actually verify from which entity this this multicast message was sent. And there is a bit indicating whether this multicast, whether the signature is included in the message or not. So in principle, you could set that bit to 0 and not include the counter signature, in which case this would be the symmetric only setting. So it actually includes, the solution includes both symmetric and asymmetric. And depending on whether you set it bit and add the counter signature, you get source authentication or not.
So in essence, this would be the solution to my problem. I had been battling in ACE for a long time. So if we accept this, I'm done.
I think so too.
Don't say no.
Okay, so I would think we have a pretty good consensus that we want to adopt this document again in the room. So we will now go ahead and verify that consensus on the mailing list, because the stoppage we had encountered there is probably no longer applicable. So let's go ahead with that. Thank you, Marco. So, next attempt. Michael Costa, are you out there?
What's the status of that draft? Is this a working document, not working document? What's the status? The current status of multicast?
That's we have in-room consensus to adopt it, so it will be a working group document when we have validated that on the mailings.
Okay, thank you. Right.
So Christian, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Very
Hello?
good. Oh, now Michael is here too. Yeah,
Who shall go first?
So Michael, can you try that again? Sorry. Michael? So now I hit press this button once. Oh, he disconnected. Yes, and wonderful. Hi, Michael. Let's hear about PubSub.
Okay. How do we do the sharing of slides?
It's very dark in the US.
Yes, it is.
So you should see the first slide of the PubSub presentation.
Oh, great. Okay. So, next slide, please. The status is basically the same as it was when we presented this in Prague. There's been no substantial work done on the draft, unfortunately. We were busy with other things. But basically, to repeat the status, there's been no substantial changes since working group adoption. We're not adding anything to the protocol, keeping it very simple, and we addressed a substantial set of comments, or we're in the process of addressing a substantial set of comments that we got before the next update, but we don't have the next update ready at this time. Okay, so next slide, please. So we'll produce a version 3 of the draft addressing all of these outstanding comments. We had some great comments from Jim and Jim Schad, and we worked through those really at the last meeting. So we still basically incorporating all of those changes. We discovered that we wanted to really be careful about the normative language so that we could generate test cases and not have a bunch of spurious requirements that weren't important. So we need to go through that. And since we have a good security model now, I think with the PubSub profile and OS core PubSub profile, I think we'll incorporate some specific guidance around that use of that profile, and I do have a little bit of feedback on that also, that in light of this. So we're still targeting, we'll revise this 03 review, and we'll expect to have something that we can target for working group last call on that, around that time frame. So I guess we're looking at still trying to get something meaningful done before the next London, would it be? But that's basically the time frame now. I haven't spoken with the other authors to have a good consensus on what we can do with this. So this is just sort of my idea.
So what is the implementation status at this point?
I believe we have 2 or 3 implementations, but I think we need to sort of collect those again. We had one implementation quite some time ago, and there was just there was one in between, and there was just a recent one. I think we had some questions. It was GE Healthcare. The person's name was Kranick from GE Healthcare that was asking some questions, and I think that was around an implementation as well. And so far as I know, that those have been, some of those questions have even resolved, or sort of brought up some fundamental issues about how we define observe and things like that, but I haven't really seen any really fundamental big changes needed for the PubSub. So what do we need to do for implementations? Do we need to collect some results and publish them back, or do we need to list them? Because I've frankly lost track of a couple of those efforts in the time that's been elapsed.
Can you repeat the last sentence? That didn't arrive here.
What do we need to do with implementations? Do we need to include references to that somehow, or what's the requirement there?
No, it's just when we last called this thing, it might be a good idea to know what status it has. So to me, it seems you want to do the 03 draft, then it probably would be a good idea to round up those implementations and see if maybe we even can get an interop going that can be a virtual interop, and then we would go for last call. I think that's the sequence of events here.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Okay, Dave?
Are there more slides after this one?
There's one more for me.
That's the one I want to talk about.
Okay.
Okay, yeah. So I guess that was the question that we brought this up in PubSub because there was a need to have some flow control. And I think that we had a request from OCF to go ahead and publish this or go ahead and register this ahead of time. So what is required here? Can we just do this? Diana form?
Do this. There is an RFC for early allocations. I forget the number. But as a working group, we should agree that this is kind of stable. Do we think this is going to continue to look like this? Of course, it's modeled after the HTTP 429 code, which is well established. So it's not like we are completely inventing this, but maybe there are core-specific considerations we should think about before going ahead with the registration and the text that goes with that. Dave.
Yeah, so Dave Taylor, yeah, this is the slide I was hoping that you had one of. So I don't know if the request actually came from OCF or from a particular company, since the request that Michael and Karsten and I don't remember who else was on, talked about product developers. I don't know if it was on behalf of OCF or not, but in any case, the point is a bunch of product developers want to use 4.29 potentially outside the scope of where it's a resource directory, right? Because it's too many requests. The resource directory is one case, but I read this as saying maybe it's not just for resource directories. And so there's actually another implied question here is, what's the right way to specify it? Is specifying it in the same document okay if it says it's not specific to that? Is splitting it into a different document that might go forward faster than the other one? Or should we actually constrain it to say it's only for a resource directory? Now, I read Jin's email as saying not necessarily just for RD is what he wants it for.
Yeah, well,
so the other comment, okay, I have a second comment too, but I'll wait for Michael to go. Go ahead, Michael.
Oh, okay. So it's definitely the intention to have it be registered as a parallel thing to HTTP that anyone can use for similar situations for flow control.
Not specific to RD, right?
Yeah, that's
right now it is only in the RD spec, and so the issue is that reviewing the rest of the RD spec requires all the other stuff that we're talking about, but people want to use it sooner because it doesn't have to depend on all that RD stuff. And so the question is, should you split into a different document, or, so my other comment is, the registration process for response codes is IETF review or IESG approval. Okay, there's the or that's there. IESG approval says you better have a good reason to, and so technically it's his call, right?
Right, and I think that would be...
I'm pointing to Alexi standing in the room here. So.
Okay, that would be a reasonable approach for me anyway. Yep.
I'm usually don't like, telling editors to split or merge documents, but in this case, I think, especially if it's a generic thing, putting it in a separate document, and it's relatively simple, it can be progressed early, and once it's stable, then working group chairs request me, and I take it to ISG, do all allocation. Or we just publish it and get it done.
Right, because it's up to you as the AD and technically the ISG as a whole, right? But they're going to look to you for a recommendation as to whether it requires a specification or not. That's your call. You should have sort of feedback from the community to make that call. So you could say, we're going to early register it and keep it in the same document and let it appear in the RFC when the RD1 comes out. That is a valid option to your choice. Another option would be to say, split it into a separate document because you want there to be a document and you can progress it earlier, and then it's not an IESG approval, it's just regular IETF review. Okay? Or there's probably a couple other things. But the point is, there really is flexibility here as far as what the process is, and it's between the working group and the AD and the IESG to decide. And the request is, they just want to have it appear, the product developers just want it to appear in the IANA registry one way or the other so they can start using it.
Question, can you remind me what's the allocation policy for the registry?
It is IETF review or IESG approval. And so the IESG approval path is saying, Alexi, on behalf of the IESG, sends email to INS said it is okay to have this one appear in the registry prior to there being an RFC, right? And the guidelines for IANA consideration section RFC talks about what the requirements are for IESG approval, but I gave you the Cliff Notes version just now.
Even for IESG approval, you effectively have to have a blurb describing what the error code is. So it's much better to have it in a document.
So do you want it in this document and tied to the timeline, or are you suggesting having splitting out this tiny section into a one-page document that's separate, or do you have a different recommendation?
I have a slight preference for a separate document, but if people want to just keep it in this one, I wouldn't mind.
I think it makes sense as a separate document. It could be really easily explained how to use it, and it would make more sense as a general thing than to try to just, I would rather not to try to generalize it in PubSub, but have it rather be a separate document.
Okay. Ari Keränen, yeah, separate document fits perfectly. When we were designing it, we designed it to be generic to begin with. It was just easier part of this document as a separate document to start with. And one clarification, this is the PubSub document where it is, not the RD document. So if anyone is looking for it, it's in the... So yeah, we are happy to split it, and as long as it progresses fast enough.
Dave Robin, and I see Peter Venderstock right behind me. I was maybe I'm thinking the same thing. His suggested change seems like it could be combined with this. I'm thinking actually, aren't we missing 302, which seems to actually fit with what Peter would wanting. He says, I do a get, I get a 3.02 moved with a location header, it's over there. That seems to be traditional HTTP stuff, but 3.02 is not in core.
Yes,
so,
for a good reason.
For a good reason.
Yes.
Okay. Well, anyway, maybe I'll just stop right there because I was going to suggest we take 302 and 429 and maybe some others and throw them in a document and have additions, just the same way they had an RFC that added like 5 new status codes to HTTP way back when. But I'm sure you're going to tell us what the good reason is.
So I don't think 429 is in any way controversial. So this is really a document that should be able to be moved very fast, given that we have a volunteer who is creating the document. So somebody has to do it. Ari wants to do it. Okay, good. So Ari is going to create the 429 document, and yes, the thought is good. If we have any other no-brainer, non-controversial response codes that we want to add, we can put them into that document. So let's think about that, whether that's the case. Ari has one.
And if they turn out to be non-brainers, please, let's not put them there. Quite often it happens, yeah, this is going to be easy, it takes a week, 2 years later. So just make sure that whatever this new document ends up being doesn't end up blocking PubSub broker.
I still think it's, Peter van der Stok, I still think it's a good idea to combine the drafts. If the no-brainer, or the brainer tends to be a long no-brainer, we can always remove it.
Yeah, I think we can take that part to the list. But I think we agree that the objective is to have a document that is not creating friction, so it's not getting in the way of getting the implementers send these too many request responses. Okay. So next item. We did CineMail, we did OSCORE. Then I think we are at Echo and Request Tag. Christian, are you there?
Yes, I am. Hello.
Hello.
I would like to talk about Echo and Request Tag. This is a slide, please. This is a document about 2 options that have been around for half a year to 2 years in various documents, originally presented in IETF94 in the actuators document, which was a combined problem statement and solutions document. In Prague, we've pivoted them to be one document about the options and one about the problem statement and the possible attacks that need to be taken into consideration, and presented the relevant attacks there and how those options can be used in a setup where the device is, as we're used to it, very constrained, maybe doesn't have a clock, and asked for alternative approaches back then. Slide, please. We've heard the feedback from then and renamed the repeat option to the echo because repeat was way too confusing because it's not a repeatable option. By now there is not only the updated document on the solutions, but also an updated problem statement document that covers all the cases. The document was taken up by OSCORE, so OSCORE now uses both options where it needs them, and we've been asked to upload the last version as a working group document, which now it is. The mechanisms that are there, so how things work, are, I think, fleshed out by now. So these are functional. Next slide, please. What still needs some work is how we phrase them. So the echo part will undergo a bit of a rewording in a future upload, and there are various other editorial fixes we need to do. And peeking ahead to the next presentation about delay attacks, I think there is some valid criticism we'll need to respond to from there with respect to how easy it is to come up with a time that is suitable for keeping around or for waiting for an updated response to an echo request. So that's the state of the document. I think we can proceed with that. Are there any questions? Slide, please.
Can you be a bit more specific on how you want to restructure the echo part?
Frankly, I can't, but I'd ask Göran or John to comment on that.
I was planning to some more structure, clearer requirements, what has to be, making the echo part opaque, making it clearer that the client does not look at that, just echo it, making it clear what requirements it put on the server when it creates the echo, and then putting forward these are two example and recommended ways to do it. Yeah.
Thank you. That was John Matson.
Julian from Huawei, and one question. Who is authorized and when to set the threshold to the echo option?
That is something the application decides.
Yeah, but I think, okay.
So each application has particular freshness requirements, which maybe it should have arrived within the last minute. It should be fresh by a few minutes, or which might be this needs to be very strictly timed, and I can't accept any request that's older than 2 seconds. And the application would need to take that decision and forward it to and you instruct the underlying library or whatever to act on that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so I think that the document should be specific about what the application gets to decide here and how the application interacts with the mechanism. Okay, anything else on the echo part? Then we have another presentation about a different way of handling the freshness problem.
Okay. Hello. My name is Julian from Huawei, and yeah, this proposal comes from the question I just asked. When I read that document, its name, or yeah, let's go to next page. Okay, this is the old version's repeat option. What confuses me is that how to set the threshold, because I think it's very important for the threshold is an element in the comparison. So if we set a threshold too small, and maybe some normal requests will be discarded due to this mechanism. And if we set it too large, and I think some of the delays may not be discovered. So that's the main things that confuses me. So we propose another mechanism to resolve the delay attack issue. The way that the client sends the valid time window in the message and to the server, and which contains a start time and time duration. If the message is got before the valid time window, and then this message would be, this action would be be in the queue, and when the time window is arrived, then this action will be done. Yeah, the other cases is when it is received, when this message is received in the time window, then it may be act immediately. But if it is received after the time window, it may be discarded. And this is for the single message request. And in some cases, we, for example, in the AGV, automatic guided vehicle cases, the AGV will got multiple messages, but it can only work under one request, and so it has to process the requests one by one in a sequential mode. So that's why we propose the next. If some actions are multi-interrelated, so we give some three kinds of response policies. The first one is primitive mode. This means if a new message is arrived with this primitive mode option, then it the server should discard all the previous messages in the queue and process this one. And the second one is sequential mode, just as I mentioned just now in the AGV cases. And the third one is that the sequential with conditional discard. If the message, this is that if request 2 is about to expire, but X1 hasn't come yet, request 2 should be processed before it is expired. And when request 1 comes later, and it should be discarded in this situation. Yeah, thank you.
Göran Selander. So, thanks for making this contribution on time-based freshness. So I sent some comments to the mailing list, and I think that the problem statements you're looking at is slightly different from the ones which are in the ECHO draft. So in the problem statement is rather in the activators draft, but the solution is the ECHO solution. And I think that we actually need both type of mechanisms, one non-spaced and one time-based.
Yeah, I agree.
So that's my my first comment. The second comment is that there is not so much coverage on the use cases in the document. You mentioned now a use case which is not mentioned in the document. So I think it would be good if you could expand on the use cases and what different modes you would need and what situations. So it's much easier to understand. And the third question is how much of this should be specified in core and how much is application dependent. We actually had the same question when it came to echo. There were a number of different variants and adding features and so on, but we basically cut them down, and it's now essentially it's a nonce going back and forth, and that's the only thing we specify in core. So, but that's things to consider.
So, Dave Taylor, I couldn't tell, so let me just ask explicitly: does this assume that the client and the server have synchronized clocks?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the last word.
Do you require time synchronization so they both have the same value of absolute time?
Yeah, I think we should use absolute time.
Okay.
Yeah.
I couldn't tell from the presentation or from the draft, but I was guessing that was the case. And so if that's the case, then you should say that explicitly, and then in your security considerations, you probably also want to have text about a dependency on a secure source of absolute time.
Okay. I think this is a comment that Solander has already sent to me. Okay, I'll do that next. Oh, okay.
Okay. Hello, Christian Amses. A question about the sequence numbers. Do those sequence numbers pertain to requests to a particular resource or to multiple resources? So is this just used to reorder requests to the same URL or to different URLs?
Yeah, I think it's to the single resource.
In that case, did you evaluate the use of the if match option that already exists for that purpose, that would allow you to say that this operation should only be processed if the state of the resource is still the one that the client assumed?
Okay. I'll check it after this session. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
So it seems to me that there has been some good feedback on this draft. It's not yet entirely clear what the use cases are. I think it would be good to work a little bit on that. And I think the observation about this whole freshness area was this is an area that needs to be controlled by the application. And with the echo tag, we just have, with the echo option, we just have found one place where we have common behavior for many applications that we can factor out into a core app option. So what I would like to see in the next version, maybe of this document, is can we arrive at some common behavior that multiple applications would want to use? Because right now there's a lot of things in there, but it's more of a shopping list than a concise thing that we would want to have in an option. Okay, so I think it would be good to look at this in the next version. Göran.
This was just, sorry, Göran Selander. This was just returning to the other draft. We can go through the next steps on the echo and request tag. We just left it there. What is going to happen with that?
Okay. Do you want to say that? Or?
Yeah, I can say that. I think that after restructuring an editorial, we should have a few reviews, and then we should go for working group last call. That's my proposal.
Right. So please do the restructuring, and then we can decide whether it's time for that.
Should we ask for reviews?
Yes, that's a good point. So who is willing to provide a review of the next version of this document? So Francesca, Jim, Carsten, Ari. I don't know how to say your name, but we'll put it in the. So yeah, thank you. Okay, thank you. So next, pending we did. We have a number of drafts that have been around for a long time, but that haven't really moved very much. And it seems we should be cleaning up a little bit. And the first one is the SMS draft. The interesting thing is SMS is actually being used in lightweight M2M. So there is a kind of a underspecified part of the lightweight M2M specification. And it might be a good idea to fill in that gap from our side. But Tim has an idea about that?
Yeah, this is Tim Karinoke. Actually, lightweight MDM in their specification has actually just gone ahead and done that piece of it, where they, designated a WAP push mechanism to do SMS. So, for the need for lightweight MDM, they just progressed. And so I don't know if there's anything that they would do other than we'd have to make sure that whatever, if we wanted to do something else, it would have to make sure that we incorporated those aspects of what they've already defined.
So can you say what kind of mechanism they now have?
So they utilize for SMS a WAP, what they call WAP push. It's it's through the 3GPP, I think, WAP mechanism. So it's called WAP push. WAP is the protocol. Push is the extension to the protocol.
Okay.
So they've progressed and solved their problem, right? So there's nothing here that IETF needs to solve for them. That's my point.
Okay, that's interesting. Look.
I can comment that a couple of weeks ago, in the OMA meeting, actually, there was an interesting demo by one of the companies there, AV Systems, and I got actually a commitment in a sense to contribute to the draft to make it align with lightweight M2M one way or another, to commit with this draft from one of the AV Systems guys.
I'm sorry, I didn't understand. So what we...
But what I'm saying is that some of the features that the lightweight M2M has already for co-op over SMS could be adopted in this draft or vice versa, but they could be aligned. And I already have a commitment from one of the guys in AV Systems that is participating in OMA DM and lightweight M2M to do that.
Sure, that's right. So as I was saying, no matter what we do here, we'd have to align. But from a lightweight MDM perspective, they don't care. they've already moved past this, right? Correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, they've put it in the specifications what they're going to do for SMS. So that's already in the lightweight MDM's technical specification.
Yeah, but I mean, maybe we would like to align actually a bit more with what co-op does in that space, I would say. I mean, I don't know. This is something maybe we can discuss later on in detail, also in the OMA group. I don't know if you have an opinion, by the way, Hannes, on this.
So I think that was useful 5 minutes to spend to find out that there's something going on there, and we have to take this offline and see where we want to take this. Yeah. No, duplicate is probably not a good idea. Okay, so let's talk about two other drafts. Christian, are you still there? Christian, are you still there? Yes? Ah, you will. Okay, good. Go ahead. told us you were sick. So.
Yeah. Hi. Yeah, so indeed the interfaces and dynamic links drafts have been in limbo for a while, and now I came on board as a new editor for these drafts, so we're trying to push this forward as well. In general, I think that both these drafts are actually in rather good shape. They do. Okay, let me just yeah, it's okay. I'll just stand this way. It's fine. Yeah, I'll look at this one. Okay, so both these drafts I think are in pretty good shape. Basically, I would say that there are some editorial issues that need to be fixed. There have been, so if you use the issue, we are using the issue tracker in GitHub. So there are some minor issues to be fixed, I think. In the interfaces draft, at least, a couple of them have been open since the last version. And there are two new ones. One is basically to align the examples with what's happening with SNML. And then the other one that Michael raised was regarding some consistency with the OCF interface pattern for using the interface link target attribute. Okay, and for dynamic links, we switched back after Tim brought up the problem of GTH and LTH to GT and LT, so that it's more aligned with Lightweight M2M. And again, going forward, probably this one needs a lot more editorial work than the interfaces. So the examples need to be made much clearer. There's 4 open issues, and all of them need to be resolved. So two of them are actually on absorbing some work done in 2 drafts. One of them is for adding a new link relation, and then another one's on error handling. So I hope that we can get this in working group last call soon. Firstly, we need to at least clarify the how the editorial issues can be fixed, and then after that, probably we'll need to ask for reviews again. So that's the status of this.
So who has read a recent version of one of those documents? Well, a few, yes. Well, appropriate to the speed in which this develops, so maybe a year or so. Yeah, so these are interesting documents because they were started at some time, then other STOs took their content and did something with it, with that, which is good, but we never really finished them. So we are now in the situation that we have to look at what did the other people do there, which is, for instance, the reason why this reversal there was done, because Lightweight M2M already had defined it in a different way. So this is a little bit, yes. So that change, there would have been, would have had to be a really good reason to make this change, to make it incompatible with what Lightweight M2M does. So given that we are picking up speed now, who would be willing to review new versions of this document? Hannes? Somebody who I cannot see? Alex, Tim, Peter? Ari? Wonderful. Okay. So I think we have enough energy to complete this. So what's the time frame you see for this?
Well, I think the time frame was to get this ready by Singapore, but I'm now on board, so I'll try to get this done as quickly as I can. I'll try to commit. I mean, I was a bit unwilling to commit until we get some authors back into active status, but hopefully we can get this done by London.
Okay. So get done in the sense of be ready for working with last call by London. Okay, that would be great. Do we want to continue this as 2 separate documents, or is this something that works better together?
No, I think it's a good division.
Okay.
Let's put them both as separate documents because certain SDOs have taken one, not the other. So I think it's a
Right.
good idea to keep them separate.
Thank you. Okay. So let's go on to the dev viewer end. That never happens then.
Okay, so if you were in the meeting last time, we talked about the background for this. So this draft had been around for a bit, but it is relatively widely used, I understand. And the idea is basically just to support various kinds of device identifiers. And of course, you need to be aware when it makes sense to use device identifiers to begin with. So there are some cases where that makes a lot of sense, and some cases where you probably want to hide things instead of using the device identifiers. But this is for the case when you actually do need them. And so we support things like MAC addresses and one-wire identifiers. And we prepared version 05. Has a couple of changes. I'm going to go through them quickly here. So we made a change to the delimiters for these extra parameters that we allowed to sort of point to a part of a device, like the humidity sensor part of a particular one-wire device, as in this example. And we just changed the syntax from using semicolons to using underscores. And the reason for this change was, maybe we can make the integration with SendML easier, because SendML does require some limits in the character set. And we have gotten some feedback that maybe the character here is it could be some other character as well, like slash. Would solicit feedback on that in a bit. The other change was that we added something called organization-specific device identifier. So this is an idea to open up the space a little bit. So if you had a company or some kind of organization that needed to support their own device identifiers, you could do that relatively easily without having to specify a new RFC. And the particular way we went about that was to point to private enterprise numbers. So here, URN dev org, and then a private enterprise number 32473 is actually the example enterprise number, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 would be the device identifier in this case. We also considered using domain names here. That's another option, but again, soliciting feedback on whether this makes sense. This is sort of opening a hole of sorts in this mechanism. We added some text on privacy considerations and added some text on IANA considerations to specify when allocations are appropriate. And let me just do the next slide, and then we'll go to questions. So what I'm actually sort of soliciting feedback here for is, first of all, the delimiter change. Is that sensible? Does it break any existing usage? Because if it does, maybe we don't want to do a change. So that's an important thing to talk about. Do you have any thoughts on the local device identifiers? Is that a good thing, bad thing? Should it be done in this way or some other way? Let us know. And then I've also gotten some email from some Nokia folks. Not sure if they're here. That indicated that one M2M and a lightweight M2M have some have been using some device identifier types already in their specifications. Should those be folded in? And there was a question about that I know nothing about, the BBF Broadband Forum USB protocol. Has some identifiers, could perhaps be used, incorporated here. I mean, obviously the idea is that if we do something that's sort of a friendly amendment of of this specification and done with some coordination of the people who actually came up with these ideas. Peter Saint-Ander complained that we haven't done the new RFC and the associated new URN registration template correctly. We'll have to get to that. And I had done a mistake in the ABNF for this new organizational type device identifiers, which we'll fix. And then we had talked about draft adoption in a very abstract sense last time, but we didn't actually do that, like call on the working group list. And I didn't talk to the ADs to ask for AD sponsorship. I think this would be more of a working group thing. So those 6 things were the ones that I wanted in particular to get feedback on. And then any other things that you have on your mind. Go.
Dave Taylor. So I looked at this last IETF, but not since, and so you may have to remind me. But my question is on the delimiter part. Something you said triggered my comment. On the last slide, you said that something about the humidity part of a device, and that's where I got lost. Is this a device identifier, or is this a resource identifier, or what? Because if it's a device identifier, then part of a device doesn't make sense.
Well, arguably a part of a device.
Dave said he was going to say the same thing. So,
arguably a part of a device can also be a device of sorts.
I say pick one. Either it's a device identifier, or it's a resource identifier, or pick a different term. I don't know, but maybe some third thing. Is it a device identifier, or is it not a device identifier? I guess is the first branch.
We set out to define device identifiers, but way back several years ago when we started doing this, there was an indication that people wanted to be able to point to a part of a device as well.
Is that part a resource, or is that part a something else?
I find that question difficult to answer at the moment.
Okay, then I don't know what the use case is. I mean, I understand a use case of a device identifier, got that. I understand a use case for a resource identifier, got that. A case for a something else, I don't got that yet.
Well, there was some very concrete, like I can provide concrete examples. I don't know what other people had in their mind, but the concrete example that I had, for instance, some of my devices were ones where you had actually like multiple, like it was one physical box with one physical network interface number, but it actually had 2 separate circuits in it.
So this is Tim Carey, Nokia. There's actually, we were seeing some of this in 1M down, right? Where, and I don't know if it's the case here, Ari, but where actually you get, like these cuff monitors, like for blood pressure and stuff like that, where you actually plug in these different other modules inside there, and each one have to be identified. I don't know if that's what you're trying to do here.
That's very similar to what we were doing.
We're starting to see that come in. There's a lot of that for some IoT. I was the one that gave you the 1MDM, lightweight MDM that they use that stuff for. I did have a question though, because the BBF USP protocol, they're already in their own namespace. I was just saying that they do something similar. But you did mention that you're using an ORG for organizational, then you made that a private enterprise. We actually used in the BBF, we actually used the PEN to make it a private enterprise number versus an OUI versus whatever. So we were very clear on exactly what was going to be the format. Is this going to be a private enterprise number, or is it going to be an OUI or whatever? So we were kind of clear. We just didn't use a, kind of like the org type of thing, where you weren't really sure what it really is going to comprise of, right? So just to let you know that, they use PEN and OUI for that type of stuff, very specific to the format that you would expect it to be.
Just a comment about the lightweight end-to-end part. Basically, at the moment, we have the URNs are identified for UIDs, for tier 69, for emails, ESN. You have it there on the spec. And yeah, I mean, excuse me? Yeah, they are not there. Yeah, correct. Yeah. So just maybe reiterate.
So just for my clarification, the lightweight M2M thing, is that using the dev URN type but adding new subtypes inside that, or it's doing something else?
Actually, I'm not sure. I mean, I think they use the main one would be, I would guess, the UUID as in RFC 4122, and then depending if you use, for instance, management protocol IETF100-CORE-20171114-1330, then we'll have that protocol specific information.
Okay, but yeah, but that's another IETF spec. I was interested if they're using this spec and just building under that something new that we should actually recognize, or they're doing something different, totally different. I have the spec, but I didn't have time to read it yet.
Yeah, so they use a number of namespaces. The only ones from the dev namespace that they use are the OP or OS and OPS, which is the
Okay, but they're using something from the dev space.
from that dev space.
Yeah,
yes.
okay. So
right, that's what you needed to know. They're using other ones for IMEI, and that's all in the other IN.
That's fine, but now you answered my question. So they actually are using something underneath this thing. So that means that we should probably act in some fashion and allocate those at least so that we can point to their spec or something.
Okay, so Dave Taylor, so the subsequent discussion, including your response, made me realize there's a different question that I should ask. Because I thought I said I got the use case for a device identifier, and then I realized that's actually an ambiguous statement, because what different orgs call a device varies. And so to some organizations, the device is the physical thing, and to other organizations, a device is a particular role that may run on that physical thing. So in the OCF terminology, for example, they use the word platform to refer to the thing that's the physical thing, and it can have multiple devices installed on it. The humidity device, and the device is something that refers to like a model of what a device is. And if it has multiple sort of device models, then there's one platform with multiple devices on it. And so the term device itself is also ambiguous just in a generic sense here, as we really have to define what it is that we're talking about. Because I think you're talking about a device in the same sense as, say, OCF uses, and not the physical object when you said part of a device, right? That might be how OCF might describe part of a platform when they're talking about the term device. And so it's quite possible that what you mean is a device ID in the same sense as what OCF would call a device ID, which is, as a normal developer, that's not what Dave would call a device ID, but I understand how the OCF terminology is. And so when we're talking about this, we have to be clear what the use case is and decide whether this is a general use case or whether it actually varies enough by ecosystem that it belongs in some ecosystem-specific URI scheme. Like OCF has their own URI scheme that they embed a device ID in the same sense that you're talking about, right? But they do it in their own ecosystem stuff that's OCF : okay? And so I guess the question is, what is the use case here? If the use case is coming from one M to M and lightweight M to M, then the two possible answers are, this is a lightweight M to M specific URI scheme, or it's not, and we have to have a definition that makes sense outside of lightweight M to M. Either of those are okay, and I'm just trying to figure out which of those two branches to go down.
Yeah, and I'm not sure I can answer the lightweight M to M question, but I think that there's a...
I just want an answer before a draft adoption.
So
right.
from the 1M to M and the lightweight M to M perspective, it's going to be an identifier. From the 1M to M perspective, it's the actual identifier of what you would call a platform. Okay. For a lightweight M to M, it's actually the identifier that is used. It's the endpoint identifier of the lightweight M to M client, right? So it can be the IMI, IMSI, and other type of URNs, but sometimes it's actually the OUI product class serial number, right? Which identifies the device that the client's going to reside on, right? Those were the two things that they use it for.
Right, and sort of the additional thing I wanted to say to you, Dave, is that I think that the goals of this work initially and still, I mean, the main goals are about ability to identify things that have like hardware addresses and such, hardware addresses, and different organizations and different groups will definitely use different terminology for what things they refer to, and then places like lightweight M2M will need to point to many different types of URIs and URNs, in whatever they're doing. So we're trying to like what the IETF usually does, provide a capability to point to particular types of identifiers for which there is no convenient identifier at this this point in other ways. And then the only discussion we're really having is A, terminology, and B, whether we're doing those additional pieces after pointing to the hardware identifier.
Well, and part of it will depend on, well, it will affect, because you were asking about, delimiters and things, and that makes sense in certain use cases, and it may not make sense in other use cases, depending on my question. But I was going to say something else, and I forgot what it was. So,
yeah, I mean the delimiters and the parameters. So, it's up to whoever is applying this, whether they get to use them or they need to use those or not. But the general syntax was the question here. So if we have something like this, then what characters are allowed there, and how does that affect users of the syntax on a higher level? So that was initially this question about the delimiters came from the SendML work.
Yeah, I mean, I understand you're creating this sort of, I don't know if hierarchy is the right term, but sort of URN followed by dev followed by something that identifies what the next identifier is, Mac or whatever it is. And so maybe there's multiple possible answers. One if you say it's Mac, and one if you say it's whatever the other options are that were on there. And there could be a different answer for each of those if it's all of the above for different purposes, which is, okay, why would you do that in the same URI scheme? But you can, sure. What I actually got up the mic to say, I just remembered, was, or get back to the mic, you mentioned that, if I understand right, when you talked about the hardware identifiers, there's actually an important thing that you didn't put there that's consistent with what you just said, which is you didn't say it was unique, right? This is not the only identifier. So if you have something with 2 MAC addresses, you actually have 2 URNs for the same platform, right? And that's perfectly fine, right? According to this definition, right? Because a hardware identifier does not mean that there's only one hardware identifier for that device. You've got a MAC address and those other things, and sometimes you have multiple MAC addresses and so on. So this is one or more aliases for that same device that are each some definition of device or platform or thingy identifier, right?
That's right. So the queue is drained. What are the next steps, chairs?
Maybe one more for the queue. So Ari Keränen, I saw one use of the component part that it was more about grouping, for example, sensors of a device. So then in that part of the use case, it doesn't necessarily have to be, and this was in SendML context. So in that use case, I mean, SendML could also define, you can get the unique part for the URN itself and then use something else. But overall, I've seen, let's say, useful uses for that. Maybe we want to be not too specific on this specification. We say, okay, this is how you can have a component or a fragment of a bigger thing, and then the using specification can define, hey, here's the exact way how to use this.
One other clarifying question about current deployments, because people said parts of this are already being used in like 1MDM or lightweight MDM. Out of the different variations that Jerry showed, we can have different types of identifiers, MAC address and so on and so forth. Are all of them in use, or only some of those in use today? With this URN scheme, I don't know if you go back a slide or whatever, you see the list. There was like 3 of them on there, right? I just can't remember which ones they were. Yeah, there we go. NIs, UUIDs, IMEIs, etc. Out of that list of things, which ones are actually deployed with the URN dev scheme today?
So that list was actually, this is other identifiers that this spec complements.
Right. That's not the one I'm thinking. That's the one where you mentioned MAC. Oh, supports e.g. MAC and UI. Okay.
Right.
So you're saying the one that's on the bottom right there, that particular example, is that already in an RFC, or that only in the dev URN document? The URN dev MAC?
That's in this ID. It's not in our RFC.
Just making sure, because I'm not aware of one, unless you're telling me. Okay. So my question is URN dev MAC actually deployed in like lightweight MDM and stuff today, and is URN dev anything else deployed in those today that's not in an RFC?
I've seen at least some use of both the MAC and the one-wire subcases, and now we're talking about adding potentially other subcases, and I guess the lightweight M2M use case are potentially in use.
The reason I'm asking is if there's already deployment, okay, then you can say there's a valid justification that says we don't care about we care about backwards compatibility, right? And it's like the delimiter case or whatever. For cases that are not deployed, then such a question is not important. And you could even ask, well, does it actually need to use the URN scheme at all, or could it be in a different document, a different scheme or whatever, and be sort of punted out of the part that we need to do sooner because people are doing it now, right?
Right, and I mean, there's INA considerations where we can add more of these subparts later. So that's all fine. We wouldn't wait for somebody to do this or their part if we had to wait.
So since you are commenting on Lightweight M2M, maybe Tim or Hannes can correct me if I'm wrong, or if you can add additions. As far as I know, the UUID was the overarching way to identify endpoints, and then within it you have different URNs depending if you are using tier 69 or IMAs or IMSI or other way to identify the device. The only case, as far as I know, on dev is for the tier 69 case, but I might be mistaken. Tim? Exactly. All right.
So it really, and this is Hannes. So it really depends what type of devices you have and how you can best identify them uniquely in your environment. Obviously, those who work more in the cellular space, they do what Tim just said. And we, for example, we use UIDs for the most generic case because, you know, if you have, let's say, a Wi-Fi device, Bluetooth, etc., anything that's sort of just connected to the internet, then obviously where would you get the IMEI from? So you use UID. That's the...
Right. Yeah. Let me...
You can use it actually within the UUID.
But it... Okay, so just wanted to point out one thing also, an observation. So we have a draft that is not an RFC yet that defines this dev scheme, and there are other organizations in the world that are allocating already things under the dev scheme, which, you know, maybe we should get this registered in the IANA and, you know, the RFC out and all that pretty soon.
So from the discussion, it seems to be pretty clear to me that we do have the energy to work on this. I think we should verify this on the mailing list and adopt this as a draft, but in parallel continue with the information collection. So we have all these various parts that have come up here, and we need to pull them together so we know what the picture out there is. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. So the rest of the agenda is two items that are really new work. We have 10 minutes to talk about Opc Ua, and we have 10 minutes to talk about the timescale option. So can you start with Opc Ua?
Hey, it's the first time to talk about our draft. Our draft is named Opc Ua message transmission method over crop. It's Junrui Wu. First, let's talk about our motivations. Our motivations are clear. Opc Ua is a data exchange standard that provides interoperability in industrial automation. Second, utilizing Opc Ua transmitting over crop could meet the demand for Industrial 4.0 based on the exchange of semantic information. Our goal is example to achieve different ways to transmit semantic information from clients to servers to build based on Opc Ua over crop. First, please let me introduce what is Opc Ua. Opc Unified Architecture is a data exchange standard for safe, reliable manufacture and platform-independent industrial communication. It enables data exchange between products from different manufacturers and across operating systems. Opc Ua has a lot of advantages. First is functional equivalence. It builds on the success of Opc Classic. The second is platform independence. From an embedded microcontroller to cloud-based infrastructure, all of this can use Opc Ua. The third is security. Opc Ua is firewall-friendly. We are addressing security concerns by providing a suite of controls. The last is comprehensive information modeling, the framework turns data into information. This is the protocol stack of Opc Ua. The foundation of Opc Ua is shown as in this figure. The fundamental components of Opc Ua are transport mechanisms and data modeling. The transport defines different mechanisms optimized for different use cases. For example, if you want a good speed and throughput, you could use UA TCP with UA binary. If you want it to be a firewall friendly, you could use HTTP with XML. This is request and response model of Opc Ua. A serious interactions is needed for clients to connect with servers. Here is our preliminary work. We designed an Opc Ua compression and decompression mechanism for 6LoWPAN. We designed a nano Opc Ua server for wireless field devices by use Contiki. We integrated IEEE 802.15.4 with Opc Ua for low power wireless sensor networks. We designed a domain agent mechanism with Opc Ua. Here is our testing platform. The nodes we used are STM32 and CY2420 RF model. We built a test network consisted of 50 nodes, a board router, and an Opc Ua client. The purpose what we do this is applying Opc Ua to WSNS based on 6LoWPAN. This figure shows architecture of Opc Ua over CROP. In serialization layer, Opc Ua packets are encoded in either UA binary and UA XML, and the option field in the CORP header can specify parameters to support both formats. As for security, DTLS runs on the top of UDP in transport layer to make sure the whole communications work in the security mode. We designed 3 transmission schemes. First is proxy for Opc Ua to CROP. In Opc Ua, message is exchanged using HTTP or TCP. CROP's design inspiration meaning comes from HTTP. The two can be mapped between each other to meet some special sense. So we put a HTTP to CROP proxy as the boundary of the network to transform HTTP request to CROP request. The original UA client does not need to change. Second is direct transmission. Opc Ua packets are encoded in either binary or XML format, so the entire packet of the Opc Ua can be encapsulated in the payload of the CORP message for direct transmission. Notice that this method of transmission needs to be modified on the server side and the client side. The third one is REST transmission for Opc Ua. The traditional Opc Ua needs a series of interactions to establish a session between client and servers. This scheme reduces the interactions process in Opc Ua. CROP request and response can carry Opc Ua information model to achieve communicating. Next steps, we will add some use cases to our draft and further improve the details of the draft. We will implement the proposed architecture and make some considerations about security. We will optimize the pub and sub of Opc Ua and the CROP. It's over. Thank you.
Dave Taylor.
Yes.
So I'm familiar with both COAP and Opc Ua and have written code for both of them, and so I find this draft extremely interesting. I do have some feedback, which I can give offline or whatever, but I think the question I have, even though I'm very interested in it, I don't know right offhand what the use case is. And so you mentioned that on your last slide. Is when would you run Opc Ua over COAP, given that they already have Opc Ua over UDP, or sorry, over TCP, where we have COAP TCP. So what specifically is the use case you're trying to do? Assuming there's a good use case, I'm very interested in this. I don't yet know what the use case is, but like I said, I'm tentatively in favor of this if there's a reason to do it, which is what I'm trying to figure out. So please, tell me.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, we will make some use cases to our draft.
So if you don't have the answer right now, that's okay. I'm saying that's what I would be looking for is tell me a good use case, and if so, I'm willing to review or whatever this. Because I deal with both of them. An example of a technical point which we can follow up on later is on slide 130. you showed the secure channel layer over the top of DTLS. And if you compare that back with the Opc Ua stacks picture, you notice that anytime that there's a lower layer of security like HTTPS, that the secure channel layer is not used. And so I don't know of a reason that you'd ever have them both in the same picture, because the slide about 2 or 3 back did not show that in the OPC architecture. And so, but that's the example of something we can follow up on afterwards, because that doesn't invalidate the rest of the question about running Opc Ua, basically the UA binary layer over the top of CoAP, which is interesting if there's actually a good use case for that.
So I do have a question, and it's, why isn't this being done in OPC?
That is a great question, because that's part of the use case question, which is, would OPC want to do this over CoAP? Because as was mentioned, right, they do have an architecture that is transport binding independent. Okay? Right. And so, like in the OCF organization, they're the organization that takes care of how do I bind their protocol to CoAP or CoAP TCP or HTTPS or whatever. So I agree with you there too. So regardless of which organization that you're in, because my company's a member of both, I'm happy to review it in either place, right? And so I think it's interesting work to me regardless of that. But I think that's a great question: is does it belong here or does it belong in OPC? And there's a good argument for it being OPC instead of IETF.
And the reason why I asked that was because you're doing that binding of the upper layer and you're using the CoAP as a transport, which is perfectly fine. But there's nuances to that protocol, right? Where you need to have the expertise involved. Now, thank God you got someone who's got some expertise.
So
but
do it there and have IETF review it. I mean,
right,
that's sort of ideal. Right?
Yeah, speaking for the BACnet community, I would say amen. Why are we doing this in IETF? BACnet fully intends to do a BACnet over CoAP binding, but it's none of your business. No, it's not. And I'm being flippant, but no, of course I'm being flippant. But what I mean is, we have lots of different requirements or whatever. We're going to look at CoAP and say, can we use CoAP as a transport for BACnet? Yes or no? We're going to come to you. We're going to get it reviewed, whatever. Just like we did with IPv6 over BACnet over MSTP. Well, there will be involvement, but most of the brain damage for specifying the mapping then that will be done in BACnet, where all the experts are in BACnet.
I still love seeing a presentation here, so thank you for doing this. It's the same thing as like I was doing for OCF, right? Here are some asks from OCF. Here is the way OCF is planning on using, say, the URI schemes. Do you have any feedback for us or whatever? And when we talked about the redirect dish mechanism, do you have any feedback for us? Having the liaison stuff, even if it's done in the organization, is very valuable. So thank you so much for coming here, and please also go to OCF or OPC if you're not already.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Well, Jian Changho from Huawei. So thank you very much for, and I think it is a very interesting topic, and also we are very interested in looking for the use cases.
Thank you.
Hello? Thank you. So my name is Laurent Toutin, and I will talk about slow reactive devices that can be connected to the network. So when I talk about a slow reactive device, it's a device that cannot talk all the time. For example, you have a slotted network and you have slot, but not very often. So you have to delay your transmission. It can be also a network where you have a duty cycle, and so you cannot send all the time because you have to keep silence between sending. Or in the example I give here, is that you have some receiving window. It means that you can receive messages only after sending a message. And all these kind of network introduce delays in transmission. So for example, here we have a device that, we have a device that sends a message and then have to wait a long time before receiving an answer if something, for example, goes wrong. And the device knows that, but the server is not aware of this kind of behavior, which means that if we keep the normal parameters we have in the server, at the time we keep the message ID value to avoid duplicate message or processing twice a duplicate message. So we will have trouble if we want to have here a generic server that can serve these reactive devices or normal devices. So we need a way to inform the server that we are going slow. So to do that, what we propose is to add what we call a timescale option that will say how long the message ID must be kept by the server. So this way, the server will avoid to just process twice the duplicates. So the idea is to have here a value that we put in seconds that say, I will send, this message must be kept for a period of time, this period of time, into the server. So here the design is not good, so I need your help to do it. So I think it must be a critical option to inform the client that if the server doesn't process it, then there is an error and he has to change his behavior. And of course, we don't need caching for this. So for the security, I think it's also a way to improve security because it's a kind of guarantee. If you say message must be kept 1 hour, it means that you must send very slowly during this period of hours. So it doesn't increase the number of messages the server will have to process. So that's the idea of this option. So there is an interest for LP1 working group to have this, and we wait for comments.
Mohit, so like even if you say that it doesn't increase the number of messages, it still utilizes resources at the server by making it keep things in the memory. And like if I could send many of these, I would still use up a lot of the memory. And like you would not accept, so you would anyways authenticate the client, right? You have some information of the client. You just don't start like interacting with anyone on the internet. The first thing you do is you authenticate. So you have some information of who you are talking with, and you then probably have some information of what kind of a device it is, right?
Yeah.
So
for my vision of a server, you have already this information. You have to keep the message ID and the address of the client when sends the request. So here you just keep the time and when you have to remove it. So it's just a few bytes more.
Hi, this is Hannes. Could you get back to the drawing, the figure, please? So, so the option indicates on how or when the device will expect to be transmitting messages again. Is that fair to say?
No.
Like I'm trying to understand the figure here that we see in front of us. So
here, yes, you're right. So here, when you send a request,
yeah,
you will say how long you have to keep the message in the server memory.
The response, the ACK message, or which message?
In the request.
The request. Okay.
Yes, in the request, you say, you have to keep this message, for example, for 1 hour. Or this message ID for 1 hour.
Okay.
This way, if I send it again, this will be viewed as a duplicate and not as a new message.
Mm-hmm. What I'm trying to find out is how that relates to for example, the queue mode or the sleeping proxy stuff that we've been working on elsewhere. And I'm still not totally sure how it does. And if it somehow relates, I wonder whether the information at the granularity of a single co-op message is actually useful because, for example, in lightweight M2M, it's you indicate the queue mode. The fact that you actually in a network that exhibits that behavior is not going to be changing at the level of each individual co-op message. So you're not going to send that information with every co-op message. That would be a waste. Instead, you send it during registration once, and then the infrastructure takes care of it. So I'm trying to, maybe I need to do a little bit more like comparison or so. I don't know if you've ever looked at, so there was a long debate in this group on sleeping proxies, and at the end, Lightweight M2M went off and did one variation of it. And I don't know, have you looked at that? Maybe that's actually useful for you.
No, you have to give me the reference.
I can send you a slide deck and
okay.
with a webinar. No kidding.
Christian.
Hello, Christian Amsus. Could you go 2 slides forward to the timescale option? Thanks.
Yeah.
I think you should be careful to consider the case of proxies here, even if they are not sleeping proxies, because what this is proposing is a mechanism on message ID level, and this terminates on the proxy. So this shouldn't be an option that could just be forwarded through the proxy, because the client doesn't actually need to know about the oddities of that endpoint, but the proxy needs to know. And I agree with, I think it was Hannes, on that this should be per device or per link and not per request, because it applies to all and it's just wasteful otherwise.
Okay, if it's per link or per device, I think it's more complex to memorize. If you repeat it in each request, it seems more easy, but we can discuss of that. Well, this is all compressed away on the IP-WAN compression, so. Okay, I think you've got some feedback here. What do you plan to do next? So to work again on the document and try to have it as a working group item on our assumption. Okay, so we're looking forward to another draft of this. Okay, thank you. So we finished 1 minute early, which is unusual for us. Well, we could talk about NDBM and SID mail if we wanted to, but maybe not. Reg desk, I think. Yeah, this desk is really good for catching up on sleep.